Thank you, Chiara. I would like to thank Professor Sinan. I would like to thank the colleagues from Scienza in Parlamento, Alessandro in particular, who initiated this with me, and also all the Italian, British, and other organizers of this event. I mean, it is a real honor for me to be able to address this distinguished audience. And also, actually, I'm a little bit touched almost when I think that this might be a point in history somehow concerning science advice in Italy, and especially with respect to the Italian Parliament. I hope this will mark some kind of development that will come out of this event to some extent at least. So I will be talking in my capacity as head of the STOA somehow unit, which is responsible for the administration of what we call the Panel for the Future of Science and Technology of the European Parliament, as it has been called since October of last year. STOA stands for Science and Technology Options Assessment. I would like to say from the outset that STOA is not the only research service in the European Parliament. This, I would say a small part of it even. Parliament has a whole Directorate General of Parliamentary Research, and also every committee, or groups of committees rather, they have their own policy departments that conduct research on the basis of the expertise budgets of the committees. So I will concentrate on what we do and the experience I've accumulated over, I would say, directly or indirectly being related to STOA over the past almost 20 years, and more directly somehow over 15 years. So if we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So quickly, in terms of a little bit of history, actually, as it happened with Post, I guess, everybody around that time paid a visit to the United States, which was setting an example with their Office of Technology Assessment, which was established in the 70s and ceased to exist in the 90s, by the way. So there are new efforts in the US to reestablish something similar, but I mean, that's a part of history, something we can talk about later. So in STOA, inspired by those developments in 1985, there was a report that acknowledged the need for such an office to be established within the European Parliament. So there was a pilot phase that started in March '87. So we celebrated also our 30 years a couple of years ago. And this was established as a pilot project for 18 months within the committee responsible for research of the European Parliament. And then a year and a half later, it was established, so the STOA started to work then, and actually on a permanent basis, and made available its services to all the committees of the European Parliament. And at that time, actually, the committees appointed the representatives to the STOA panel. I will explain exactly later how STOA is related to the committees of the Parliament, which is an important link. Actually, in 1990, STOA actually became a founding member of the European network of similar organizations, which continues to exist. Italy was part of it, but it ceased to be present at some point. Hopefully, it will reappear soon. And now, coming now to STOA itself, STOA has a constitution, so it has a set of rules that define what it does. So out of these rules, I would isolate 2 points. First of all, we do studies, which, as you can read, are independent, high quality, scientifically impartial. They deal with the impact, so it could be economic, social, environmental, and other kinds of impact. I will go into that in more detail later. About new technologies or emerging technologies, I would add. And what is also very important is that then the main added value of these studies is the identification of options for the best courses of action to take place. And very much along the lines of what Lydia said about Post, we avoid making recommendations, and we can talk about that, actually what recommendations mean and how they're related to options, but we focus on identifying policy options which we present to the politicians so they can take their decision, bring in also other elements like their ethical, religious, other views, political imperatives, and whatever they consider equally important for them. We also organize different forums, or fora actually, which are different events that we organize, and I will explain a little more detail, where we bring together people from the scientific community, the political community, and also from the European institutions and so on, to discuss topical issues and see what the different options are again. So STOA is governed by a panel of members of the European Parliament. There are 25 of them. They take all the decisions about STOA activities, studies, events, visits to other countries, and so on. They're appointed by different committees of the European Parliament. There's one vice president, one of the 14 vice presidents of the European Parliament, is, among other things, responsible for the STOA. And then the ITRE committee, that's the one that deals with research, energy, industry, and telecommunications. They have the lion's share, sort of 6 members out of the 25. Then there are another 5 committees: environment, employment, internal market, transport, and agriculture, which appoint 3 members each, and 3 committees: the Culture Committee, the Legal Affairs Committee, and the Civil Liberties Committee, that appoint 1 each, and this comes to 25. These people are appointed every 2.5 years, in the beginning and at the end of the legislative period. The next one actually will be, the current panel will expire at the end of this week, when the legislative term expires, and then when the whole parliament is reconstituted again, the panel of STOA will be reconstituted also around September, October of this year. Within this panel, there is a group of 4 members, which plays an extremely important role. That's the Bureau, which is the Vice President of the European Parliament, 1 chair and 2 vice chairs of the STOA panel. They will all be elected during this constituent meeting later on in autumn 2019. Historically, actually, I will explain now 3 stages, 3 important historical stages, but also thematic stages in the activities of STOA. So historically, STOA has been conducting what we call technology assessment studies, and this is actually the subject of this European network that I mentioned. I would like to emphasize for these studies the fact that they are medium to long term, they are complex and interdisciplinary, and they relate to the impact of science and technology on society. As I said, there are other services of the European Parliament. They tend to deal more with topical issues, with ongoing dossiers or files which are being considered by the European Parliament. We tend to take a more strategic point of view, to look more into the future anyway, and also to cut across committees. So STOA is one actually instance of the Parliament which can bring together the activities and the interests of different committees of the European Parliament. Proposals for STOA studies, or also for STOA events, if you like, can be submitted only by members of the European Parliament, which can be members who can be members either of the STOA panel itself, but also any other member or committee of the European Parliament, or even body of the European Parliament, like the Bureau of the Parliament, the President and the Vice Presidents, can submit proposals for studies. Of course, we play a big role in all of that. We can inspire them, we can bring different topics to their attention, we can even formulate semi-final proposals, but it is up to them then to bring them forward as proposals. Now, once a proposal arrives at STOA, not any proposal is accepted. Some basic conditions that you see listed here are that they should be relevant to the work of the Parliament, they should have scientific and technological content, they should be of strategic importance. Sometimes we have refused proposals because they were too narrow, too specific. And also occasionally, I mean, every few years, STOA defines a set of priorities, and we try to align the proposals to those priorities. And of course, there should be scientific evidence available. We don't deal with sort of imaginative things that there is no scientific evidence to back them up. At the moment, for the past 4 and 5 and even longer years, actually, the 5 main priority areas for the research of STOA are eco-efficient transport and modern energy solutions, sustainable management of natural resources, including, for instance, agriculture, water issues, and so on, the potential and challenges of the information society. This is actually an area which has attracted increasing importance in recent years, more than other areas probably. Health and new technologies in the life sciences, like medical issues. There has always been a continuous stream of events that we have been organizing in this area. And then a broad area of science policy, communication, and global networking. I will come in a little more detail to that. So this was the line, also the strand of technology assessment. So scientific foresight is the second line of activities of STOA. It is not completely distinct from technology assessment, but I will try to talk a little bit about the differences, and also I will enter, because this is a newer area of our activities, I will enter a little bit longer into the different methodological issues of foresight. So the idea was around 2014, around the time of the previous European elections, that the STOA panel put forward, and then this was accepted by the higher sort of bodies of the European Parliament, that STOA should become a permanent body of the European Parliament with a foresight a role in science and technology. And all of this was seen to take place in the so-called agenda setting phase of the policy cycle, rather than when the legislation is already proposed and approved and so on. So the aim was going to be to investigate how technology could change our lives in the future, and to enhance the preparedness, to prepare the members of the European Parliament better for this future. We don't predict the future, but we can prepare for it. Now, and this was reflected also in the structure of my unit, which contains the STOA Secretariat that serves this panel of members, a Scientific Foresight service which was added in 2014, and actually a third sector, the European Science Media Hub, which I will talk in more detail about later. This is our latest activity, which was added last year. Now, I will go into a little more detail into scientific foresight. I will talk about the comparison somehow when foresight becomes more useful compared to technology assessment, some key elements of our approach, the main steps, then how we communicate this to the members, and the lessons we have learned after 4 years of foresight. And it's already 4 years since we started it. So when is scientific foresight of added value compared to technology assessment? I would say basically when the issues that we are considering, or the particular technologies we are considering, have two properties. When they're uncertain, there are more and more of them, like in robotics, genetic technologies, there's a high degree of uncertainty, which we have to look at and also to communicate, which is not easy to politicians and the public. People are used to certainty, and also the uncertainty causes uneasiness with many people. They should also be disruptive, like blockchain, and in some cases also precision agriculture, which may require completely new skills from the farmers, which they may not be prepared for. As I said before, we don't claim that we know the future, but we can look around, see what it might look like, and prepare ourselves for it. So the three important elements of this approach are, first of all, that we consider different kinds of impact. So many of these elements are already present in technology assessment, but we are much more conscious about them in our scientific foresight approach. So different kinds of impact, multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder, and also multi-perspective, and this is what we call steeped. Don't be surprised, I will explain what steep means. And so, let's go first to the different types of impact. A technology can have intended and unintended impacts. So when you introduce mobile phones, you don't expect people to get addicted to them from the beginning, but they may later. These are things that you can brainstorm and think about in advance. Then there can be hard impacts, which are due to the technology itself. Usually they're quantifiable and measurable, like a car can crash, or you can be poisoned by food or something. So these are very concrete things caused directly in a very objective and measurable way by the technology. And then there can be soft impacts that people are often less aware of, and these are related to the way the technology is used, so they're not always intended. They can be qualitative and therefore less easy to measure, like, for instance, the addiction to the internet or to cell phones or other things. So then the multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder aspect. So when we do a consultation that will, for a foresight study, we want to bring together individuals of different backgrounds, including also social scientists. Also, this is actually reflected objectively in the composition of my team. So in the past, it used to be a team composed of scientists, of hard scientists. Nowadays, you will see legal experts, you will see social scientists, and you will see journalists also more recently. So this reflects, or this is already reflected very objectively in the team. So these people can include philosophers, ethicists, sociologists, specialized in science and technology, and then you bring along also a wide range of other stakeholders, and they all discuss the outcomes of the technical briefing about this particular study that you are studying. And this is done in a facilitated brainstorming environment in a multi-perspective way. So what are these multiple perspectives? We look at every issue from a different a set of lenses, and these lenses are different ways, different aspects of of the impact of that technology, which can be social, technological, of course, but they can be also economic, environmental, political, legal, ethical, and demographic. And the red letters explain what steeped means. So these are all different lenses through which you can look at a particular issue. So once you are aware of these different aspects of our methodology, now the main steps are the following. First of all, there is a systems approach, which is, next slide please. So in this case, we are given a particular issue, a particular request for a study that is proposed by a committee or a member. It is considered by the panel of STOA and it is approved as a STOA project. Then we frame this issue in accordance with the needs of the clients who are the MEPs. We also carefully analyze the issue and we zoom out of it so we can have sort of what we call a vue d'ensemble. So we can see in a holistic way the issue together with all the side issues and the possible consequences. Then we identify the different aspects of this issue that need to be investigated. Like in the case of precision agriculture, apart from all the technology and all other issues, you may need to look at farming business models, for instance, which might not be immediately obvious from the start. And then background information is quite important in this case, because you need to translate all of this in the right context. And then you have to identify alternative sources of information and all the groups that might be affected or affecting this particular issue. So this is the first step of framing the issue in the right way. And then we go through a step which is also common to technology assessment with technical expert briefings, which collect then the technical evidence, the scientific evidence. In principle, you try to achieve a consensus among the scientists. You know that this may not be always easy, but at least this is the main sort of target at this stage. And then all of this should be written in a way that is understandable to lay people. So most members are not technical experts who are our main clients, and also we make these studies publicly available, so they should be understandable to everybody who might care to know about the subject. Then we go through the steeped analysis and we list a number of considerations. And finally, we begin to set up the scenarios. So we prepare the scenarios in view of the next stage. So a set of hypothetical scenarios, and we call them also what-if questions. So you can let your imagination loose somehow and think, what if computers could be 1 million times faster, or what if skyscrapers could be built of wood? You know, so these are things that are not obvious to everybody, but you can see more and more people talking about them. So once you have set up this preliminary phase, you compose a group of different stakeholders who may be affected or affecting this kind of technology. These are technical experts and social scientists. You brainstorm with them, taking this steeped set of lenses into account. One key rule in this, which distinguishes this phase from the previous, the scientific phase, where I said that you try to achieve some consensus, no consensus is required here. Actually, it's very important that all participants should try to understand the concerns, hopes, and fears of the others. So it is very much a learning sort of process for every participant. And then you bring in your what-if questions and you explore them further with this group of stakeholders. The result of this phase should be a list of opportunities and concerns related to possible futures linked to the technologies. Then once you have built these scenarios, you go to the policymakers and you ask them to look at the possible future scenarios. And then you try to build a set of such scenarios which need not necessarily all be entirely plausible. You might as well try things which are somehow daring in some sense. And actually it is very important to be conscious of the fact that some of these scenarios may be the favorites of some politicians and some others that may be favorite to some other politicians, and you are aware of these differences and you allow all of them to have their point of reference in what you do. This is also related to the whole question of options and not limiting yourself to a certain line of recommendations somehow. So for each of these, you have a set of envisioned opportunities and so on. The main question is, what must be undertaken to attain the desired future? And then you build a roadmap how to reach this future. So I will maybe go a little bit quicker through some slides, which I don't, so the communication issue is nevertheless important. So you need to go to back to the members and have some feedback loops whereby you refine your outcomes by bringing them over and back to them and always considering the different aspects. And then we make these results public, and you announce them to the members and to the broader public through a different kind of technical reports, summary reports, options briefs, various formats, paper, blog posts, videos, and also promotional channels. We have been using more and more social media in recent years. So the main sort of conclusions after this practice, after this experience, is that the information that you gather from this foresight experience, from this foresight exercise, is complementary to the scientific evidence, that all opportunities and concerns are legitimate and should be considered, and actually the longer you go into the future, the unintended and soft impacts, the more important they become. And for some people, it's easier to think ahead in time. Technical experts very often do not do that because it is too risky to go 45, 50 years ahead. And overall, we find out that the foresight sort of practice facilitates the preparedness of the MEPs to be ready for the future and to anticipate future sort of developments. And I would like to emphasize one success story, which was the study of STOA on the ethics of cyber-physical systems. In this one, we worked together with the Committee of Legal Affairs of the Parliament on a resolution that came out in February 2017 on civil law rules in robotics, which contained several very interesting proposals for the Commission to take action on them. And this was a so-called legislative initiative report of the Parliament asking the Commission to take action in this area. And along with the Legal Affairs Committees, a number of other committees, 6 other committees of the Parliament were involved in this process, which took several months until it came up with a resolution of the Parliament. And STOA contributed a lot also to the annex of this report, which contained the code of ethics for the practitioners and for the users. I will probably speak less at length about the European Science Media Hub. This answers to the situation that, as you know, scientists, they are not happy with the media, the way they report about their science, but the media are also not happy with the fact that scientists do not like or are not capable of communicating sufficiently well, and in the middle of all that, citizens are confused and they do not know what scientific evidence to believe in. So this is a challenge also for policymakers and society as a whole. That is why STOA decided to launch this Science Media Hub, which is an authoritative center for information, networking, and education at the interface between the European Parliament, the scientific community, and the media. And this was announced in November 2017 and has been operational since last year. I will skip the next slide. So the main activities of the European Science Media Hub, next one please, as I said, were networking, training, and knowledge dissemination. These include some workshops with training for journalists, how to identify fake news and how to be more conscious about the soundness of the scientific sources of information. They look for how to also report better on the different scientific issues. We've done a couple of these workshops, and we just finished in the beginning of June in Strasbourg a whole summer school for journalists where we included all sorts of quite imaginative uses of new technologies, how to enhance their capacities in this area. Now, a list of publications, just to give you a taste of what we, the kind of topics we deal with. Maybe we can focus on the last 4, which were published this year. Technology and social polarization. You can see also the kind of bias or the kind of direction that our publications are taking with the recent political development across Europe. Regulating disinformation with AI, with artificial intelligence, the governance of algorithmic accountability and transparency, and also, why not, the synergies between technology and the arts, which can be quite inspiring to both sides. Foresight, I'm showing here 3 examples. One is of a set of trends reports where we try to identify, for instance, in this case about blockchain, the different applications of blockchain and the kind of impacts we expect from this technology. A fully fledged scientific foresight study on 3D bioprinting and medical enhancement purposes, for medical enhancement purposes, And then also the last one, very short 2-page publications, which we call What If, and where we invoke a certain technology, possible impacts, and what this might imply. I will go then to the, to the next and to the one more. There we have a number of ongoing STOA projects at the moment on collaboration of the EU organizations at the international level, innovative solutions in healthcare, rethinking education in the digital area, ethical and moral issues of artificial intelligence, the impact of blockchain on international trade, and the impact of the general data protection regulation on innovation and scientific research. These are ongoing studies which will finish sometime between the summer and next year. New projects which we are about to launch these days, digital future and of work, the effects of platforms on the economy and society, and in particular the issues of liability of online platforms. You see all the legal aspects and social aspects that enter, the future of crop protection, to go into a different kind of area, the carbonization of the transport system via e-fuels, and then also the monitoring and surveillance in the digital era. You see the sort of quite important social consequences of all these, and technologies for the 2040 battlefield. Then a number of workshops. I will not go in detail through them. I will only mention briefly then the next one, please. The two last annual lectures of STOA. That's the highest, the most important event of the year, where in the last 2 years, 2017 and 18, we dealt with artificial intelligence one way or another, and also with quantum technologies and cybersecurity issues. These are events where we invite people at the level of Nobel Prize or equivalent, and they give talks which are quite interesting and very relevant. And last slide, I think it is quite important to mention it. We run also an activity called the MEP Scientist Pairing Scheme, inspired from an activity actually that was happening through the Royal Society in the UK, but we've been running it now for 12 years almost. We bring together scientists and pairs of one scientist and one member, and they spend some time together in Brussels, where the scientist sees how the MEP works, and also the MEP has a chance to establish links with them, and we want them to establish also lasting links that will take over the years. And so we've been running it on an annual basis since 2015, and we hope this will continue. I think I will stop here, and I would be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.